Anne of Fiberfloss and Fiction. Welcome back to my podcast. Today is October 31st, 2023, and today's episode is going to talk about books that I've read this month and my reading plans for going forward into November. We're almost through October. We just have today left, so whoosh, this whole month has gone by really fast. So today I'm going to talk about the books that I've finished reading, the one book I'm almost done, and then the upcoming plans for Nonfiction November, which is an event I participate in every year. It's hosted by a book Olive, who is here on YouTube with her podcasts. And so I will link to her as well below so that you guys can check out her information. Hashtag Nonfiction November is also a thing on Instagram, and she has a community on Goodreads as well as the Story Graph. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's talk about what I have been reading. Okay, so a handful of books to talk about that I have read in October. The first of which is Assistant to the Villain, which is, I've got my Storygraph app open here, which is why I'm looking down. Assistant to the Villain by Nicole Maehrer. And this was my September Caffeine and Legends subscription box book. And this is a kind of fun, tongue-in-cheek mystery where this young woman who is in an alternative universe that has magic takes on a job as the assistant to the local villain. And there's a plot to overthrow him, capture him, and he's got a whole other scenario of things where he's trying to sort of wage a guerrilla war against their local king, and she gets roped into being his assistant, and winds up finding out that he's not as much of a villain as you would have thought. Lots of fun characters. I spoke a little bit about this book in my last podcast, and very enjoyable, kind of light, funny read. Characters are great. It's the first in a series, so it does kind of end, but not too much of a cliffhanger, which if you've been here before, you know I don't love. So Assistant to the Villain, that was very good. I read a book called The Witching Year, a memoir of earnest fumbling through modern witchcraft, and the author of this one is Diana Helmuth, I think I pronounced her name right. There'll be links to all of the books that I talk about today below that go over to the Story Graph account. I received this as an advanced reader copy from the publisher. It's a memoir about this woman's attempts to sort of figure out what witchcraft means and to find out more about the religion of being a witch, I guess, or the organization of being a witch. And what she comes to find is that it's a very solitary path in the sense that you kind of have to figure out your way. There's no one book you can read. There's no one church of the witch you can go to. And what she comes to find out is a lot of the things that she felt were too witchy for her, meaning she didn't really think that they had anything to do with her and her life. She winds up slowly starting to figure out that witchcraft for her is kind of a personal journey, and a lot of it is tied to things that she enjoys doing, things that she really likes, like being outside in nature, taking care of other people, being kind to her fellow man, that kind of thing. And so it is a memoir about her kind of learning about all these different branches that are out there, some of which, of course, are charlatans, some of which are people who believe deeply that they have immersed their lives and their life path into witchcraft. But ultimately for her, it's really more of a journey of personal development and kind of understanding who she is. So it's maybe not on the surface what the book appears to be about. But she does take 365 days, and she wrote this book kind of the second year of COVID. So she and her partner were very isolated in California and in an urban environment that I think was maybe not the best choice for both of them, but it's where they were when COVID started. So, we all know what happened when you had to be locked down where you were. So it's a self-discovery book more than anything else. And I really enjoyed it. She has a good sense of humor and an interesting presentation of different thoughts about why witchcraft or the concept of witchcraft appeals to different people. And then the final book that I have finished in the month of October was a long one, The Fragile Threads of Power by V.E. Schwab. And it's ostensibly the fourth book in her series that talks about the different Londons. A Darker Shade of Magic was the beginning book. And then there's kind of two other books. And then while this is the fourth book, kind of in terms of chronological time, it is also the start to a new sub-series within this same world. So there's a lot of new characters. The book itself is almost 700 pages long. I read this with a friend as a buddy read, which I'm glad that we did because it kind of helped us both stay motivated to read almost 700 pages. So it's the same fantasy world that Schwab has created with these layers of Londons, with Red London, White London, Black London, Gray London. The main characters in books 1 through 3, Kelmaresh and Lila Bard, who are kind of the two main characters, they're super powerful magicians. They appear in this book, but there's a lot of other added characters, and it kind of continues the story where they left at the end of book 3. So not too many details on that. If you have already read books 1 through 3, this is a continuation. It was a little bit slow for me just because there's lots of other plots, subplots, extra characters, information that you're getting to set you up for the next books in the series. But still good storytelling. The characters are great. One of my new favorite characters in this one is a young woman named Tess, who has some amazing abilities that fit into this world of magic. If you have not read books 1 through 3, I think you could start with The Fragile Threads of Power and be totally fine to move forward without getting confused. She does a really good job of catching you up on what the storyline is, how the characters fit into it, and it's fun knowing that there's a couple more books to come. So I'm looking forward to those. Schwab's one of my absolute favorite writers of sort of contemporary time. I love how she tells the story. I think she really understands the craft of being a writer and knows how to put all the parts of the story together. So that's what I've read so far in October. Let's talk quickly about what I'm reading currently and my plans going forward. Okay, so I am currently reading The Hexologists by Josiah Bancroft. This was the October book in my Caffeine and Dragons subscription. This is another fantasy book. The main premise is these two people, Izzy and Warren Welby, I think is how they pronounce their last name, the Welbys. They are private detectives set in a parallel universe to ours that has magic. There's a little bit of steampunk involved. Is a hexologist, meaning she can scribe hexes into things that confer different powers. They have been hired to track down possibly a missing heir to the current king who has lost his mind, and his secretary, the king's secretary, has gotten notices in the mail that there's this undiscovered heir from a liaison when the prince was much younger and in the military. And so Izzy and Warren are hired to try to find out what's gone on, if this missing heir actually exists or if it's a hoax. So there's all kinds of magic and things that are going on in this world, lots of red herrings. It's set in kind of a 1920-ish time period. So it would be sort of the end of the steampunk era in the sense that there's mechanical things and, there's cars, there's big industry, stuff like that. But a lot of things are driven by different types of magic that still exist in this world. So very fun. Kind of an interesting vibe to this one. It reminds me, in a weird way, of a Buster Keaton film. I don't know how else to describe it, but lots of good banter between the two main characters, and kind of nice that she's sort of the prickly, no nonsense, go get 'em kind of person. And Warren, who's massive, is kind of the stay-at-home guy who likes to cook. So the two of them are a nice pair, building their characters with each other within the story. So I'm almost done. I've got, I think, about 80 pages left and hoping to finish that up in the next day or two. Won't be finished in October, but close enough. It'll be on my list to talk about next time we visit. And then last but not least, let's talk about what's going to be going on in November. Again, I'm participating in Nonfiction November. I'll include a link to a Book Olive's channel down below so you can follow along with her if you're interested. The point of Nonfiction November is to just read more nonfiction than you normally do. So if you never read nonfiction, it's a month to try that out. If you're somebody like me who does read nonfiction, it's a time to maybe try to focus a little bit more on multiple titles. Other than reading some nonfiction in Nonfiction November, that's the only qualification. So you can make it be whatever interests you, whatever you like to read or want to try to read. Olive did set forth 4 prompts, which I'm going to try to follow this year. This is, I think, the 3rd or 4th year I've participated in it. And they are fraud, web, capital, and display. So the first book that I'm going to read for fraud is a book called The Shipwreck Hunter. And this is by David Mearns, who is a shipwreck hunter. And the book is about the different wrecks that he's found over the years. He's done some things from commercial, kind of big industry tankers, through World War II things, and a large cross-section of different boats. I'm going to be listening to this on an audiobook, so I'm interested to see how that translates over. But the reason that I selected it for fraud is the very first boat that he talks about in the book is a boat that sank. It was a big tanker freighter that was carrying, according to the bill of lading, it was carrying very expensive uranium processing machinery. And the ship sank, and so the owner of the machinery got paid out a ton of money. And it later came out that he actually had placed dynamite on the ship and blew the ship up. So he was tried not only for fraud, but also for murder. So I don't know anything about this particular case, so I'm really interested to get into that. And I know I'm going to enjoy the World War II shipwrecks as well. So next up for web, I'm going to be reading Merlin Sheldrake's Entangled Life. How fungi make our worlds, change our minds, and shape our futures. And I'm using this for the concept of web because the author's main point of this book is that fungi touch everything that is on this planet in some way, shape, or form that's living. They have a web of intertwined and entangled bits. This has been on my list since Olive recommended it. She and I tend to like very similar science-y books, and this is one of them. So looking forward to starting that. For capital, I decided to go with London. So this is London, the Autobiography, 2,000 Years of the Capital's History by Those Who Saw It Happen, and the author is John Lewis. So this one is told from kind of very, very early London times up through the 20th century. It's taken snippets from people's letters, diaries, news articles, things that are kind of notable points within London's history. Some of the writers are kind of famous names you would know. There's an excerpt from Queen Victoria's diary. There's excerpts from Samuel Johnson's diary. There's clips from various newspaper stories. But then there's also quotes and sections from letters from other Europeans who traveled to London, some things on the fashion industry, certainly about trade. So my dad had sent me this book and thought I would very much enjoy it, and it sounds like something I would really be interested in. So again, this is for the capital prompt. And then for display, I'm going to tackle Antonia Frazer's Marie Antoinette. This is a biography of the Queen of France from her very early age all the way up through her fairly young death. And I chose this for display because, one of the things that in theory, we'll see what Frazer tells us about Marie Antoinette's life. In theory, the peasants looked at all of the money that she spent on dresses and the palace and cake, let them eat cake. And that was part of the reason that the masses revolted against her and the king of France, that eventually led to them being guillotined and the rise of the French Republic. So I don't know how much of that is true. I have, very sort of basic knowledge about Marie Antoinette. But I'm hoping that this book will shed some more interesting details on her life. And so I thought that just from the cover picture, this was a great one to use for display with all of the rich fabrics and things that you can see in that painting. So that's my plan for Nonfiction November. I will be back next month to talk to you all about that when it will be fully heading into the holiday season, which I can't believe is coming up. Anyway, I hope, wherever you are, you've been having a great month of October, that you've been enjoying some fall weather, and I will talk to you again next month. Bye for now.